ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us here at SNW Gallery. We have Nathan Novack with us, and he painted this stunning bison. I like it because my son is a Colorado Buffalo. He would be appalled that I would be saying that. Go Buffs. But also Garden City Buffalo, which is where Nathan is an educator, and we want to say thank you to all of the educators who have been sticking with our kids through this very difficult time. Anyway, I'm about to turn it over to Nathan, and he's going to tell us about his art. He's going to tell us about his art journey, what inspires him, and whatever else he feels like telling us. And please ask questions, and it's over to you, Nathan.
All right, I appreciate it. I appreciate SNW Gallery, Alan, Kevin, Amy, and Mary. They do a superb job. Their collection here is amazing. A little bit about me. Well, first of all, I don't like to talk about myself a whole lot, so this might be a little bit dicey. But I grew up on the farm a little bit. We weren't farmers, we weren't ranchers, but just living on the farm, I think you learn, or out in the country, you learn a lot of things. And one of those biggest things I learned is being observant. I think being observant definitely helps you in the art world and to analyze and to break things down. So as for the art world, I was pretty successful in high school with competitions, and thankfully to my high school art teacher, Archie Oliver, who definitely challenged and pushed me in different ways. But he also created opportunities to have exposure. And a couple of those things are Scholastic Art Show, the postcard series that Kansas used to have, and league shows. These are things that definitely built confidence, just putting work into it, knowing that he wanted to put the work there and to actually be successful at these shows, and to ultimately my senior year to get scholarships through these. So right now, if I didn't have that type of exposure, that confidence built early, I probably wouldn't be standing up here right now. From college, so I received scholarships from those shows, and in the middle of my college journey, I switched from graphic design to art education and followed through and ended up getting my first job as an art educator, not too far off where I grew up from. And I have taught art for the last about 14 years. But I never put myself in a position to create art consistently and to get to galleries and to take that route. It was kind of a foreign thought, just being able to be part of a gallery and to have that. There's almost some fear of, well, I live in western Kansas, there's no way that's going to happen to me. But this past year, I've created more art than I ever have. My 2020 resolution before COVID hit was to create at least 30 pieces in a year. And fortunately for me, I was deliberate with time usage, but also it was allotted to create, and I exceeded that 30 to around 40 pieces. I felt like the more I've created, the more success or the more opportunities have occurred. From now and before college, most of my time was spent coaching, and now that I haven't been doing that, I've told myself I got to be productive somehow outside of my full-time teaching position, and I always felt confident through high school and through college as for creating, and I was deliberate on doing it again and just being productive. So that's kind of where I'm at now. As for ideas and kind of subject matter and everything else, when I do paint, a lot of it's from driving around. I mean, really, it is. Whether it's the Flint Hills, Western Kansas, Eastern Kansas, Colorado, I feel like there's just anything and everything that can be painted, and sometimes my mind goes crazy. Just, man, I want to pull over and take a picture of this area or whatnot. And it's a constant reminder. And the more I'm on the road, the more I want to do it. But it depends on what the travel is for. So, but anyway, this first one that I want to talk about, that Alan was explaining earlier, the bison, the buffalo. This is actually an image from my mother-in-law from Wyoming, and it's funny because it would be a bison. They're on the road all the time in certain areas, and we experience that too. I just happened not to get any images that time, and they did, and I thought she captured this a great, just a unique pose of this bison. I don't know if you viewers can see the tongue sticking out. I thought that was it was humorous to me, but if notice this high texture in the background here. This is all acrylic, all on the outside, and then the bison in the road is all oil. So this is it's a technique that I've kind of experimented with, and it was more successful than I actually anticipated as for a digital type look. The more realistic oil subject matter obviously gives you the focal point, gives you the main area of what you want to look at, but the background, what it's created, and I find intriguing is the depth that it allows the bison from many different ranges of, 10 feet away, 15 feet away. It's kind of like the concept of television or a computer, of the pixels. And the more you get back, the more those fuse together and look, really realistic. So you get close, you can see the detail of the realistic bison, but you see these small pixels in the background, and then, like I said, the farther you get back, the more it fuses together, but then the detail of the bison would go away. That's the interaction I really enjoy on these type pieces. And I haven't done any of these since June, but I'm still, it's in my back of my mind, and it's fun to keep things fresh as for working different styles in a way, where you have two different styles in there. So more of an impressionistic style with a realism. This next piece right here, trip to Canada. This is Swift Current is where it's at, and I have some family that live there. We went to a fair up there, and this building it drew my attention, and I thought it was really unique. There's some buildings you just don't see all the time, and this is one that just drew my attention. And the lighting was awesome. The clouds, I feel like, have great movement, and so this is this piece. It's the texture. The part about this piece is the texture of the siding, you know, when I with all these pieces, there's beforehand, before approaching images, you know, I don't know, last year or even a little bit before that, I would think of siding or rows of corn or fields, and I would feel fearful of not doing them just because it seemed like they're so tedious and so repetitive. But you'll notice as we talk about these, almost all of them have it. And this one was done a little bit different. It doesn't have as much texture as my other ones, but that shows you an earlier piece, earlier in the year, of where I was compared to where I'm working towards as we continue to talk about these. A few people that I have a tendency to look or to observe or to follow on Instagram or Facebook. One of them is Joseph Alleman, and then David Dibble. These two people I followed quite a bit early. And Joseph Alleman, he did a lot of foreground movement, or he does a lot of foreground movement. And I really enjoyed how he did it, kind of an abstract way. And it draws you up and in to the structure itself. And that's what I really enjoyed about his work. As we go to the next piece, you'll notice the rows and the layers and the different siding. This is actually not my most recent, my second most recent picture. First of all, these next ones, these next 5, I like to start off with a pretty medium to medium dark. So if we take this wall, it's probably a little bit darker than this wall. That's my starting point, and then I'll take a grid. I'll make my own grid on the painting, but it's not a traditional grid. I'll do the thirds, and I'll do it here, 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 and here, the rule of thirds, but then I'll also do the golden ratio, 1 to 1.618. So I'll have both of those on there, and usually there's it depends, the size obviously depends on how thin between the thirds and the ratio is. And a lot of times it's just a parallel line running, you got 2 here, 2 here, vertical and horizontal, and that helps gauge on the interest, on where I want the focal point to be. So a dark background, medium dark, with that gridded on there. And then as for the photograph, so I take a lot of photographs just to have on file and go through them quite often and just to see, okay, what do I want to do next? And anyway, I take a photograph, I choose the one I feel intrigued by, and I will use a digital rendering program. I use GIMP, which is pretty comparable to Photoshop. It's free, so that's the main reason why I use it. And I'm able to take the image and just put it in about 3 to 4 different value shapes. And so I can break it up that way and crop and trying to crop to where all the interest and the leading of values throughout help my composition. And I like to thank Penny Dillon. She's a mentor that I've had for the last, 2-3 months, and she's really challenged me and helped me improve on my composition. So definitely want to thank her. So I start off that way, and then I have the digital part, and then I have the framework on here, and then I'll transfer and draw the main color differences and value differences onto here. And then I attack the first layer of painting with those values from the digital rendering from GIMP, and I'll use blue black, flake white, and Van Dyke brown my three, I don't know, three starters, I guess, my base, and really lay out 3 or 4 different main value shapes, and then.
Apparently our mic is not working. We thought we had it all fixed, but, you know,
Okay.
thanks. I don't know if it's working or not.
Hello?
We can hear, but it's not, yeah. So don't stress about the mic, okay?
Okay.
Just keep doing what you're doing. Are we
Okay.
ready to go on to the next piece?
Do I just need to talk louder?
No, I think you're good.
Okay.
I think we're close enough.
When we're doing it at this angle, it bounces off this wall.
Yeah, all right. Are we ready to go on to this lovely little piece right here?
Okay, so these 2 images, the one previous and this one now, I actually, these are not even my images. These 2 are actually, and I spoke about how I take photography or take images. These 2 drew my attention. I have a group on Facebook that I follow that do a lot of barn images, and you know, before I would say, before I wouldn't ask, and now I tell myself it doesn't hurt to ask. I mean, what's the worst thing? They can just say no. But anyway, I ended up messaging this guy. His name's Tom Gooden out of Minnesota, and I really enjoyed his captures and just messaged him, and he said, yeah, go for it. I mean, just keep me updated. He wanted to be updated on kind of the process, so I've been doing that. But anyway, this is some barn in Minnesota. So it's been cropped to where I feel there's some good movement as for foreground, middle ground, and background. Now the background, there's not a whole lot of depth because these trees were just almost engulfing this barn. And that I felt like was the hardest part. I find it more difficult working small just because you just kind of lose some stuff that I feel is important, but I know it's definitely beneficial to be able to work small for the composition aspect. But I really enjoyed the depth in these just open spaces of stuff that looked, I mean, it was a little bit mysterious, but there's some stuff that definitely you can tell. You know, this boat right here, obviously, but there's some items here. You know, there's stuff in these barns that could have been there for years and just stacked up for years. And that's what really draws me to a lot of barns, is not just the outside, but these openings that get a glimpse of other things. And I like the abstract part of that because it keeps you guessing. It keeps you drawing in. Okay, what could that be?
What is that?
Right.
I love the touch of red in that. It's very inviting.
Yeah, thank you. And even the garage door. I mean, you could tell that this barn has been changed, its function and you know, its purpose of what it maybe used to be. You know, now this is a garage door, but you know that's been there for years just because it's a wooden one and it's obviously falling apart, but it's definitely interesting on additions and things that start to break and just unfold of these structures, and it's endless. I mean, there's just taking a trip across the state, you see so many changes within a year, and it just, that's what really draws me. The texture of the siding, again, before it was tough to want to do it just because you think of all those, but before I was thinking every individual one, where you really don't have to have your eye understand that we know that's horizontal lap siding, and creating different layers. You know, I feel like I'm getting better and better at it. There's a lot of things actually I'm getting better at it, but it's not just by accident. It's definitely following the right people, following people that intrigue me, listening to podcasts and YouTube videos, having mentors, and definitely feedback. So I really enjoy it, and you know, attacking a lot of these paintings is probably the hardest part, is to initially start, okay, which one do I want to start with? But once I get my paintbrush, that first stroke, I feel like it just leads me to keep going and going and going. And there's parts where you get a whole layer done and you can't do a whole lot more to it just because of drying time with oil paint. And that can be a hard time too, is when is it finished? Is that layer finished? Or is there another layer that can be done here? Is there another layer that can be done in certain areas? So I've really enjoyed these ones on the wall just because I've changed kind of how I painted, and you know, it's keeping things fresh for sure. Before I would paint, so if I was to take on this 2 years ago, I would paint from the most focal point, which would be probably about right here, and just try to complete everything I was doing. Now I'm completing the whole thing in layers, one layer and then another layer and another layer on that, instead of trying to do it from one part to another. This piece right here is one of my most recent. It's actually it's off a road that I drove back and forth for about 8 months last year. It's called Wellman Road, south of Winchester. And for some reason, this captured, I just, the roads with the snow and the two buildings, one of them looks like it's not used anymore. You got trees growing around it, and the one next to it it's a newer building, so you question, okay, is this one no longer being used? And then this one has replaced it because it was a metal building. And you can't tell that just from what I painted on here, but that's the unique part about this. But as for roads, I mean, we think of them, we want to do them all the same and make it look, you know, perfect. But in reality, there's so much movement going on that I really actually enjoyed this piece. This is my first, my only piece that I've done where there's been rows of the field. Excuse me. As for foreground, you know, I have all these weren't in the picture, but I felt like it definitely draws you in initially, more so, it creates more depth. And even this this track right here, I really enjoy this lighter track, like when vehicles drove through it. And who knows what goes on, you know. Obviously when the corn is fully grown, you don't have people driving through it or that kind of action, but I think you see a lot of stuff, different things. You see more animals obviously when the corn's down, and it looks dead, but I feel like it still has some unique beauty to it, and really love the clouds were just awesome that day too, and I just remember them moving. They were moving quick too, and really enjoyed them. I thought that really echoed the ground there.
So you added in the foreground a little artistic license.
A little bit, yeah.
Sometimes it needs that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, sometimes it needs that.
Definitely. That's before I would want to just paint exactly what the picture, you know, was like. And now I feel like I have a little bit of freedom, and I don't know why, it's just that self-restraint that you make on yourself. And now I'm able to, okay, what can I do to, what's, you know, the problem-solving skills, whether it's in the painting or beforehand, what's going to make it better compositionally.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Let's move on. This is my favorite of the ones that Nathan brought. I think it's Amy's favorite too. So yeah, we did a little like you said, like my husband typed, we're working through, thank you, iOS 14.2 for changing
And
data
Facebook,
on us,
we
and
collaborate.
Facebook, I don't know. Uh,
We're making it
it's
work,
a whole
right?
new world. All right, Ernie Novack says it's his favorite too. Who's Ernie?
Emmy?
Em-
That's probably my
Emmy.
wife.
Okay,
That's my
sorry.
wife.
Sorry, I didn't get close enough to read it. Okay.
All right, so we have this one. It's called "Come As You Are." This barn is actually in Colby, Kansas, and I know they don't have mountains in Colby, Kansas, but taking this, I stopped coming back from picking up my easel in Denver, so that's not the reason I put the mountains in there, but if you were to look on this side, you'd definitely be looking towards Colorado, but a lot of geometrical shapes are going on here with the lighting, just with the plains itself, and I've always been drawn to more of a geometrical sense, I guess, and I don't know, I enjoyed geometry in high school, and so I can see some of the connections with my art. But I started off the same way with the rule of thirds and the golden ratio, and some of the stuff that I adjusted on. These right here were different, but I wanted to add some attention and some movement, echoing a little bit of what this shadow and light was doing. This bench or this seat right here was actually there. There were two of them, and I felt like the one was enough. But the light wasn't as dominant. It wasn't a green light. It was tucked in more. I wanted to bring it out and just create a little extra depth. If you look close, you can see the color I start off as the base. But the mountains were added. These seem tedious right here. Again, I feel like I'm a little bit more patient with things like this. These are more individualized compared to some of the other barns. This is actually a barn that's in really great condition.
It's stunning. I looked at it. In fact, when Nathan showed up at the gallery, I said, "So, is this a church or a schoolhouse?" And I should have known. Okay, city girl that I am. That's obviously vent for the barn on the roof. But I see a real comparison between the first painting that we started with, where you've got the focus on the bison, and here we have the focus on the barn. And everything else is there. The background is there, but the focus is on this really amazing barn, and I love that you have preserved this barn too. Obviously, it's a well-loved piece.
Yeah, well, I appreciate it. And that the experience is part of it too. Before COVID, I was going out, and I had a business card. I was going out to many places and just giving them my card, say, hey, can I take images of your barn or your land? And it was a neat experience, just the fact that you got history from them, because they all, over 75% of the people wanted to share some facts about their property, and that says a lot. And hopefully, I get to where I can do that again. Right now, I just don't feel too comfortable, just with COVID and everything else. But that was a fun experience. This one is. I look at this piece and I put myself, at that time taking these images of walking around, and obviously this is not the only image I have of this property, but this one definitely I felt design-wise and just the way the lighting was coming on, and I mean 10 minutes later that probably would have been all shadow just because the sun was moving. That it was just ready to break on the other side. So.
And I know that from talking with a couple of the artists that we represent, it is very important that we appreciate you being respectful of these people's property. Something we all need to be doing these
Yeah.
days is being respectful.
Yeah, definitely.
So, good for you.
Definitely.
Good job. All right.
I feel like there is more success when you do ask for permission, or when you take the right route to get to, which is for sure. So,
All right.
this piece right here, a good friend sent me this image. The funny thing is, she was a competitor, I guess, when it came to art teaching, when it came to lead shows or regional shows. And she now is a teacher at Harrington, so she's in the Flint Hills, and she thought of me when she came across this barn, which I greatly appreciated. She's a super talented photographer and ceramist. And but anyway, Rhonda Levins is the lady, and she captured this, and I've made some additions and some changes to what she did send me, but the barn is the gist of it. And before it had the actual cover here, and I need to be a lot better with terminology as for parts of barns, and that's part of growing and to continue to grow with what you're doing.
I suggest contacting the Kansas Barn Alliance. They will have all of the right information for you.
And I just became.
All right.
So anyway, this piece, I want to say this is the first piece that I was deliberate on creating actual texture with the oil paint. So I wanted to be deliberate about putting layers and to get a feel of peeling paint, but with the rawness of the wood as well. So if you look close on here, you're going to see just some raised areas, especially where the paint would be. Being in the shadow, it definitely takes away, not pure white, but definitely takes away the whites. But I wanted to incorporate that down here on, if the light was hitting here, this is the white that it would be. This piece was added for that reason. The barrel with the blue tarp over it was added for definitely for eye movement. It does draw your attention just because it's so vivid with all the subdued colors around it. But enjoy. I really had fun doing all these openings, and each one different. In high school, I probably would have painted them all in black, all the same. So and I think a lot of people, if they look at barns closely, they can connect these openings with some kind of green cover, or broken glass, or broken windows where there's wood splinters and there's so much to barns and so much that I can do to add to composition as well. And I really enjoy that as an artist, and it's even more rewarding when I feel it's successful, and so I felt like this one definitely, the changes that were made benefited the total outcome. One part that was a little bit difficult was trying to get the sun to make it look like it was glimmering from the backside of the tree with these lighter tips, which actually it showed in the image that I was going off of. So.
Let's swing around to our last piece. That I will have to say, we get lots of compliments on this piece, and it's kind of a running joke here at SNW. The title of the piece is called Squirrel, which is a verb here when we're focusing on one thing and we get distracted by something else. It's called being a squirrel. So tell us about Squirrel.
Okay, so this guy right here I taught with last year, his name is David Chafee. Great teacher at Jefferson County, North. There was something about him that just was, that I found interesting. Just, he's an interesting guy. He for sure, he cares on what he does. He's one of the best teachers I've ever been around and worked with. But his character just drew me, and I told him in the middle of the semester, I said, I'd like to paint you. And you know, I was doing some paintings here and there at the school, and he would come in and look at it and everything. And after, you know, like I said, in the middle of the school year, I informed him that, and he was surprised. And before you know it, he sends me hundreds of images of him, and which he had some great ones. He happened to take this one like, shortly after I mentioned it to him, and off the side of the road. And so he's posing for his own picture, and he captured these layers of rock and trees, but it just had an interesting look, and I was drawn to that. So I had all these images to choose from. I broke it down to 10, then to 5, then 4, then it happened to be the one that he just took, not the one that he's had on file for years, but when I told him I was going to do it, I was wanting to do this digital look, because I was in that phase of creating a lot of images with that, like we talked about with the buffalo, or the bison, and so I completed. I was working on it again. This is how I was painting. I was painting the detailed areas first, and working my way down, and not being totally done with it, but I'll go over a little bit, and you know, in contrast to where I'm at now, with more in layers. Anyway, so I did all that, and then hair is one of those things, kind of like the siding on barns or the rows of a field. Hair is one of those things that you get to a point and you're like, oh great, we got to do hair now, because these other parts, they can be, they're more fun. I mean, they really are. So what I ended up doing is actually using oil pastels, and I felt like, honestly, it was an accidental find or an accidental effort, and I feel like it came out effectively. So that was all done, and if you look closely, you can barely see his glasses. I kind of like that hidden item with the texture.
Gonna see if I can get up and see those. There they are, hiding right there.
So after I completed him and his hair and his beard, I taped, and same thing again with the bison, I taped off all this. This right here is a messy technique. I first take a 1-inch brush and I'll block, just in strokes, I'll block and I'll go up and down, and they're not perfect squares, like bigger than these are, and I'll lay out at least the color or a range of color, usually a little bit more vivid, because I know what I'm going to go over is going to be a little bit more of a neutral or natural color, and it'll knock down a lot of that vivid. And you can see some of the orange coming through here, some of the more pure colors, and then I take a needle point canvas, about, I don't know, 8 by 8 or 8 by 4, and I stipple layers. The reason I chose acrylic, it dries. I mean, I can do 5-6 layers in a day if I wanted to, blow dry it or dry it in some sort. Oil would take months if I was, to do this technique with oil. But I would block it off initially with the 1-inch brush, let it dry or blow dry it, and then take that needle point stitchery canvas and stipple usually I would, so I had the base colors. Usually I would go a little bit darker as my first layer, because some of these have 2 or 3 layers of the actual stippling. And then I try to work lighter from there while this is all taped off. And this is not easy to tape off, but I grew up taping off, painting houses and stuff like that, so I have some experience with it.
We all pull on all those life lessons. So, do we have any questions for Nathan? We have lots of compliments. Talented young man, Stacy Brown is watching. Lori Nice is watching. Hi, Lori. And we know Lori from my husband's Army days. So do we have any questions? You've been very thorough, and that's great, and it's wonderful to hear about these things. Vicki Mills Lukens is watching, and we don't always have a lot of questions, but it's been fascinating to hear you talk about these things, and Cindy Crandall loves your work, so.
Really appreciate everybody's comments.
Yes, and Kendra asks if you can teach her your talent.
Oh, it might take a while.
And we have a question: Do you do portraits?
I do. This is my last portrait I've done. Mm-hmm. I've been on the rural, structure trend, and I definitely still have this intriguement about portraits. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we have had a few of those here in the gallery. So you are open to commissions.
Definitely.
And Judy Axe Kais says wonderful work, Nathan. So I think it's great that you talked about this gentleman here, and that he is an educator too. And we owe so much to so many people in this difficult time, and we're grateful for all those who are sticking through and working hard to teach our children and trying to keep us healthy and all those things. And Katie asks, what would you say to any aspiring artists who don't know how to get started?
Who don't know how to get started. That's the part. I think you're your own enemy in a way that you find a medium that you feel comfortable with first. Drawing is pretty common. I mean, pencil and paper. Start off basic. Start off shading a sphere. Whether it's pencil, color pencil, and just work on light source or work on a gradation from dark to light. I mean, that's how I start a lot of my students. I think if you understand gradation, you can definitely create depth. So, and a lot of people like to see depth.
They do. They like to see depth. I know we had a painting demonstration, talking about gradation, with Kim Taggart. Sorry, lost my train of thought there. So that's viewable on our YouTube page, and she's a graphite artist. And you talked about your 40 paintings that you did this past year. That's a lot. That is a lot when you've got another full-time job.
And most of them are this scale.
Most of them are this scale. Wow. And I know I'm not an artist. As I say, I just talk about art. But I was talking with one of the artists we represent. I was talking with her this week, and she painted every single day. Every single day. Unbelievably prolific. So keep at it.
Yeah.
Keep going. Don't be afraid.
Definitely, you have to be deliberate. That's one thing, is to tell myself to be productive in whatever manner, and it might not be on canvas. It might be it might be getting stuff ready for it, but be productive in some sort. That's at least for me, five times a week. I feel like if I have that mindset and that discipline, good things happen, and I feel like that's where it's going. And I have a lot of improvement to do. I definitely need to do some more plein air for sure. The experience, the one day I did 2 different sceneries. The one day I did it, really enjoyed it. I mean, it's
Wonderful.
definitely challenging, but you understand the color. I mean, color is so different from taking your image compared to plein air. And I know I want to be deliberate. This summer. Summers are obviously a little more open, and having that, so I definitely want to be more deliberate, doing more plein air and hopefully with that, and definitely with Kim K. Spear and her mentoring, and definitely I know where I need to improve, and I can't be stubborn and not listen, and gotta take a professional like her for sure and learn from her and improve.
And I know Kim is doing a lot of teaching during the pandemic, and she's enjoying that. And
Thank you, Nathan, for being here. And what a great segue to our next presentation, which is going to be on February 12th. We're going to do a studio visit with Kim. So that's going to be great. Thank you so much, Nathan. Any last words?
Well, just if you're out there and you have a creative mind or not, it's always self-rewarding to create a product. If it's art, if it's cooking, if it's anything, creating a product does a lot for yourself.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Nathan. And you can see all of Nathan's artwork on our website. And we are open our regular hours, and we do ship throughout the nation. So support your local artist. And thank you all for joining us, and we will see you on the 12th at 6:15 with Kim K. Spear. Thank you.